We're also streaming the program on our Facebook. If you want to share, we are sharing the link with everyone here. So we are starting now, since there are many people waiting for us in the Facebook Live as well. Distinguished speaker and dear participants, namaste and good morning. Welcome to our very special webinar on COVID-19 impact and challenges to the Maldivian economy. This is part of our special economic lecture series that we have started to understand the economics at the time when the world is hit by COVID-19 pandemic, followed by the current Russian-Ukraine conflict. Before we start, let me briefly introduce NICE. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank based in Kathmandu that undertake independent research and activities on issues of international relations, foreign policy, security issues, and issues of development. Major research area of NICE are issues related to foreign policy, security, strategy, economy, cybersecurity, migration, disaster management, climate change, and energy. Journal for Security and International Studies is NICE's flagship peer review journal. It also publishes newsletter, research papers, commentaries, monograph, and books regularly. NICE hosts some of the prominent scholars like Noam Chomsky, Mia Seymour, Stephen Wald, former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of New Zealand, Sir Donald Charles-Menin, State Minister of Education of Maldives, Dr. Abdullah Rashid Ahmed, Foreign Minister of Nepal, Education Ministers of different countries, State Minister of Regional Cooperation of Sri Lanka, Professor Kishore Mahbubani, Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, former Foreign Secretaries of India, Japan Maritime Defense Force officers, and different renowned scholars from around the region. Recently, NICE hosted NICE Global Conclave with 220 scholars from 41 countries, and the NICE International Studies Convention also participated more than 330 scholars from 110 universities. To talk on a very interesting topic of today, we have very distinguished expert, Ahmed Saruvash Adam. Ahmed Saruvash Adam is Head of Fiscal Affairs Division at Ministry of Finance, Maldives. He is fiscal policy and national budget technocrat with more than a decade-long experience in public policy, making and financial appraisals. He is skilled in economic policy, budgeting, management, and accounting. He holds Master in Economics, Economic Development, and Policy Analysis from University of Nottingham. He's also working as Chairperson of Maldives Inland Revenue Authority, and he has worked as representative of Ministry of Finance at the Board of Directors of MMA. Mr. Adam, once again, welcome to our program. Kindly make your remarks in around 30 to 35 minutes, which will be followed by question and answers. The program is streaming live on Facebook and several other platforms. We'd like to request all our participants to drop their questions on Zoom chat or on the Facebook Live. You can also tweet or WhatsApp if you like. Mr. Adams, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. It's my pleasure to present at this webinar. I would like to thank Dr. Pramod for inviting me to present here. So let me share my screen. As Dr. Pramod mentioned earlier, the presentation will be about COVID-19 challenges to the Maldivian economy and our story to manage the COVID-19 crisis, as well as the road ahead of us. So let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, it is visible, sir.
Right. like Dr. Pramod mentioned, I had the Fiscal Affairs Department of Ministry of Finance look after the fiscal policy and prepare the budget for the Maldives. So I have a clear view of the policy actions that have been taken with respect to economy and fiscal policy. So I'm at a good standpoint to provide a bird's eye view into the economy and the policy actions that we take. I will go through. I'll go through the presentation as follows. First, I'll start off with the story before COVID-19. So where we were before COVID-19 and how the trajectory looked like. And then what happened in COVID-19 and its impact to the economy. And what we did immediately after the crisis to manage the impending economic crisis and to overcome the challenges and the road to recovery that will be after the immediate response. So what we will do now to manage the economy and overcome the challenges ahead. And then I'll look at the outlook beyond and also challenges, structural challenges to the economy in general. So quite a lot to cover, but let's see. I hope that you will be able to get good information on the Maldivian economy as well as COVID-19 challenges and our story thereafter from this presentation. So I'll start off with the COVID-19, the story before COVID-19. So the story before COVID-19 is that Maldives has impressive growth, promising outlook, but downside risks remain. Macroeconomic stability was being questioned at that time because of various policies. And I think the story back then is how long will this success story continue, and where will we hit a pause or halt in the story, or maybe there is a change in direction. So these are the questions being asked at that time in 2019. So just to highlight what I just mentioned in numbers, well, Maldives has the highest GDP per capita in South Asia. It's over $10,000 in 2019. Nominal GDP is above 5.5 billion US dollars, fairly small compared to other countries in South Asia, but it is, in terms of per capita, quite high. Real GDP is about 5 billion US dollars. So as you can see, the growth is a little bumpy, but there is, in general, a high growth, over 6% over the period that I have shown from 2010 to 2019. So the average growth, the long-term growth, the steady state of the growth is more than 6%. So this is the target growth that we aim at every year, and we try to get there. But it is very susceptible to shocks. So in 2012, there was an economic, a political crisis, and because of that, there is a shock to the economy and tourism sector. And 2015 as well, there is a shock to the tourism sector, and there is a bump in growth story. But nevertheless, there is a high growth trajectory. And most of this growth is coming from the tourism sector. So as an island, small island developing nation, we are very reliant on a single industry, which is tourism. And it accounts for 25% of GDP directly. Indirectly, it accounts for more than that. I think if you add up the influence of tourism industry to all other industries, I think it will be well above 50–60% of GDP would be coming, the value addition would be coming through various activities related to tourism. So as you can see, even the contribution to growth. So for example, in 2019, we recorded 6.9% growth, of which more than close to 2% is coming from tourism directly. So it accounts for the growth more than any other industry, partly because it is the highest contributor. It has highest share in GDP. But at the same time, the growth in tourism industry is also quite high. New tourist arrivals are increasing, bed capacity is increasing. And I think the government policies and the private sector initiatives are also targeted towards the growth and expansion of the industry as well. The tourism sector is actually growing on the backs of the private sector. It is a private sector success story for us. How the private sector could contribute to the economy. I think it's a fine example of such a private sector contribution to economic growth. And at the same time, investments are also quite influential to the growth. The largest investments are coming from the public sector, where the government is trying to invest in infrastructure scale-ups and development, primarily targeted at enabling factors that would improve or expand the supply side of the economy. So through harbors, airports, and so forth. So this is adding to GDP in the short term, but in the long term, this will add to the economy through economic activities. So that is the kind of story before. So there was a growth, good growth story, and government was looking at improving the story over time. But at the same time, there were challenges to the economy at that time even. So I'm taking these growth challenges from two studies that is being done on Maldives, one from the World Bank, another from the Asian Development Bank. So one is the dispersed population. So we live in many, many islands, close to 100 islands scattered across. So very small population being dispersed across the nation over an archipelago means that the cost of providing services and also the connectivity between people and to move goods and the cost of doing so is very high. So the connectivity is very important to remove the bottlenecks in the economy. And this is one of the growth challenges that we have, the dispersed population and the lack of connectivity across people and goods. And the skill shortage, productivity gap, we have a very large young population. I think this could be the largest, it could be in the next 40 years, the largest working population. So this is the time for this demographic dividend. So we need to have good skilled, highly productive people at this period to add to the economy so that the economy, the country will get rich before we get old and have the problem of the aging population. So this is another challenge, and access to finance for micro and small enterprises. As you know, the micro and small medium enterprise would be the backbone of the economy, and they would add maximum value to the economy. But access to finance is the main impediment faced by these small companies. And we are also vulnerable to climate shocks, so we have to invest quite a lot on climate adaptation and so forth. So this is also another challenge. And we also have limited infrastructure that would enable growth. So there is a lot of investments needed in terms of infrastructure to enable growth in various areas. So these are main challenges that we have structurally at that time. And our government was investing at that time heavily in infrastructure. There was a couple of projects going on, very large projects. And government was also expanding social spending programs. And these are expanded funded by the broad-based tax system introduced in 2010, and also from debt. Especially the infrastructure is financed by debt. So government borrowed heavily for the infrastructure scale up, and main projects included the ongoing international airport, Belana International Airport expansion, the new bridge, and the 25-story hospital building. Upcoming projects include another bridge between Male and so where the port would be located, and the relocation of Male port to another area where it could be it could service a higher amount of cargo and boats. So what happened because of these? The debt increased. So public and public guaranteed debt has increased significantly. So IMF said in 2019 in the Article 4 report that Maldives remains at a high risk of debt distress. The total PPG rose to 72% of GDP in 2018, driven by an increase in external debt guarantees. So government was also giving guarantees to state-owned enterprises to enable growth and build cities. But the downside is that the debt increases, and IMF says we are at high risk of debt distress. This means that whenever there is a shock, we would be in trouble. So when things go normal, we are okay. But if there is any shock to the economy, we would face serious difficulties. So that's why from the DSA model, it identifies that we are at high risk of distress even in 2019. So this is where we are, and other macro challenges. We have a chronic twin deficit on both current account of balance of payment and also in the budget. So budget deficit is normally going towards the infrastructure scale up, and the BOP deficit is also going towards the private sector investments mostly. So the investment being driven, and hopefully it would turn to growth later on. So but the thing is, this is chronic. It has been deficit all the time. So we have a macroeconomic imbalance, and it leads to concerns over macroeconomic stability, and we need to balance these concerns. So the main main indicator that people look at is the reserves. We also have relatively low reserves compared to other countries. In terms of imports, we have 3 months of imports, but I think when we look at the structure of the economy and how it has been, it has always been 3 months. So it has been enough to manage the economy, but people would say it is risky. So the question is, can this be sustained? Can this chronic deficit and structural imbalances, can this be sustained over time? Of course, reforms were needed. Experts emphasize that the need to strike a balance between pro-growth policies and maintaining stability. So we were looking after growth, growing the economy, so growing out of the crisis, and also the problems. The growth was the answer to our macroeconomic issues. So when we grow, the economy grows, the revenue grows. So this is how we try to get out of the problems. So this is how we try to tackle the issues back then. But at the same time, we have a larger exposure to natural disasters and also climate change. So a shock is always at the door. So that is the kind of the story before. And we dread these shocks, exogenous shocks. So whenever there's a shock, there's downturn in the economic activities and GDP. COVID-19 is an exogenous shock to the economy, and this happened. And it is the largest hit to the GDP in the recorded history of the Maldives. So the question is, can the economy withstand this fall? Well, when COVID-19 occurred, it was obviously, we knew that it would be difficult. First of all, the health crisis, impending health crisis at that time was quite large, and people were afraid, and the news all over the world, especially if coming from Europe, is not very pleasant to hear. So we knew that we have to address the disease first to address the issue. So health crisis was leading towards an economic recession. The first case, we found the first case in March 2020, and a community spread was started in April 2020. Soon after, there was restrictions on movements, and also the border was closed. So this is the first time that tourists were not in the Maldives. First time in the since tourism started in 1972. And at that time, we could not even do the testing. So the testing, PCR testing, mass testing is not, the capacity is not there in the Maldives. So we had to send the samples to India actually at first to get a testing done. But we soon increased the capacity of the health sector to test and diagnose the disease, and try to invest in the healthcare capacity as much as possible. But we had about 179,000 cases and 298 deaths. So our policy was not zero COVID, but rather than managing the COVID as we go on. So you could see that there are some large waves. But because of these large waves, the initial waves were now dwarfed, but otherwise there could also be waves, But we have two other waves in 2020 and 2021. Well, these cases, all the numbers were high. The hospitalization ratios and the number of people who were seriously ill were minimized because of vaccination and other measures. And this was done without heavy movement restrictions. So these two large waves were managed without heavy movement restrictions. But initially, when the disease started, there were restrictions, and it was a heavy hit to the economy. So government, we spent about $153 million on health and social spending for COVID altogether since it started. And we increased the bed capacity, testing capacity, and vaccinated 71% of population through. This would include even kids. So if you look at the eligible population, I think this would be a much better percentage. So this was the health side, and lockdown and border closure caused the economic downturn, the largest economic downturn. So as you can see, the tourist arrivals about 1.7 million tourists in 2019, and it came down to 0.5, about 500,000 tourists in 2020. So this is also because tourism was quite good in the first 2 months of 2020. So it was a very dismal performance in 2020, primarily because of border closure. At the same time, the situation is not good in other parts of the world as well. So economic fall was contributed by closure of border, and it hit tourist arrivals. So the economy fell by 33%. So tourism, because when tourism falls, the other industries are also falling, because, for example, the telecommunication and transport industry will also be affected because there are no tourist arrivals. So the largest, the consumer base for these industries are also the tourists. So they are also affected. So you can see from the contribution to growth, this 33%, so how it is varied across various industries. So as you can see, the largest hit from a single industry is coming from tourism and transport communication, and also there are other industries, which is quite related to tourism as well. And what happened because of this? Government revenue also fell. Government revenue fell by 34% compared to 2019 and 50% compared to initial projection for 2020. So we had income tax reform planned in 2020 and a lot of new revenue measures, but none of this realized. And there is a heavy fall to the existing revenue tax base. And because of this, the revenue fell quite heavily. And it led to a widened fiscal deficit and a financing gap. So because there is a reduction in revenue, but we can't reduce expenditure as much because we have to spend on COVID-19 health crisis, as well as the economic response. But at the same time, we also need to support the government operations and functions, because if we reduce or contract the whole the government budget, the effect on the whole economy in general would be much larger. So there's not much room for contraction of the spending, but we did contract. We spent on the existing activities and on COVID management. And because of this, we were able to reduce the approved budget. Approved budget was 37 billion rupiah, and we brought it down to 30 billion rupiah when everything finished. So there was a heavy reduction in the budget as well. But at the same time, the financing gap was quite large. It was huge. So as you can see from the bottom left graph, the spending, although it reduced, the growth of spending reduced a bit, it didn't reduce as much. So we had to spend as much as 2019, quite close to as much as 2019. But otherwise, but this is including COVID-19 spending. So it should have been higher actually, because if we just sustain the similar level of spending, but because of expenditure reduction measures, it was coming down. But the thing is, it has increased the deficit, the budget deficit, quite heavily. So it's the primary balance is over 20%, and the overall balance is close to 25%. Although it is recovering over the medium term, the financing gap is large. And this is also primarily because of the U-shaped recovery. The revenue it wouldn't get improved overnight. So although 2020 was there was a large hit. So in 2021 as well, it doesn't come to the pre-pandemic levels. So this is affecting the financing gap, and there's a large financing gap because of this. And this leads to very serious liquidity constraints to the economy over the medium term. So back in 2020, during the COVID crisis, we had liquidity issues. We had liquidity problems at that time. So, and we also have to look at the medium term as well, and how we have to manage the liquidity issues at that time. So the sovereign bond that was issued in 2017, it crashed. It was trading at 77 cents on the dollar, and we have to increase that price if we have to go to the market and raise finance, because otherwise the yield that we would get would be very, very high. So we have to manage that as well. So, and the financing needs to finance the budget for the budgetary needs, and also for the foreign exchange needs are quite large, because we have to manage the peg as well. We don't want to go down on the dollar peg, that we have a fixed kind of a managed exchange rate regime. And if the rupiah or our currency depreciates, then it would be reflected in our inflation as well, because in the Maldives, the inflation is mostly imported inflation through the imported goods. So if there is a depreciation, it would be reflected in the imported goods as well. So we wanted to manage the foreign exchange as well, so that there is no large hike in the price of goods as well. So for all these, to manage all these, we have to borrow to get financing flows, and this has increased that quite significantly. So there's a dramatic increase in debt. But this is, I believe that this is inevitable outcome of addressing the crisis. So at that time, we have to face the crisis, give an acute response to the crisis, and then get the economy up and running, and then see what we should do afterwards. So now this is the kind of what I've looked at is the impact because of COVID. So I'll look at how we responded to this crisis. So government's fiscal responses to the crisis are the lifeline to defeat the virus and to provide a cushion to the economic fall. But how much can we support, and how long can it continue? That is a question. So containing the virus and to learning to live with the virus and the new normal, as we say, is the most important thing. So we had to spend on healthcare capacity. So this chart shows how much we spent on various healthcare spending. So this would include testing. So a lot of this spending would be medical consumables, and we wanted to increase testing to be ahead of the curve, so to take necessary steps before things get worse. and also to increase the bed capacity so that whenever there is a serious case or when there is a serious case, we have the capacity to address those cases and also prevent deaths as much as possible. And also to vaccinate the population to prevent the spread of the virus. So this is the main agenda behind the health spending. So this is how we spend on health. We spent about $153 million in total health spending thus far. But this is not the only thing we spent on. We spent on supporting the businesses and households to protect the population and flatten the economic recession, as popular phrase goes, the flatten the curve. So what we did back then is we supported households through various liquidity eases, cash flow eases. So we gave discounts on electricity bills and water bills. The idea is that when we give these discounts, the disposable income of the households will increase and they will be able to spend more. So there is an economic downturn. We want people to spend more and to have the internal economy going. So we gave this kind of cushion to the households. We have to also know that during this period, the employment of people were affected. Resorts were not open, so people were laid off, and a lot of people didn't have work. Those people who were on freelance activities and also businesses, they wouldn't make as much turnover as before. So they could not pay the staff as much as before even. So we introduced income support elements for those people who are laid off and the freelancers who didn't make enough money to live. So we wanted to make sure that people are fed and they have a shelter. So basic needs, these are catered for. So there is an income support elements being introduced at that time. But at the same time, we also gave loans, economic relief loans to the various businesses. The condition is that these businesses should not lay off people. So they should keep people in employment and pay them at least a minimum salary, so that the business is ready when the time comes to restart the business activities. And also discounts would provide cushion to the households to manage the cash flow. So immediately we gave these eases and also a debt moratorium of 6 months across all the loans. And this would immediately ease the cash flow for businesses as well as the households. We had other measures. For example, we gave water and electricity discounts again during another wave when there was a large wave, and there was a small slight restrictions on movement as well because of that. Government gave discounts on electricity and water. The basic idea is that to improve the household cash flow and to have the internal economy functioning when there is a shock to the external side, especially on the tourism sector. And we brought economic stimulus loans funded through EIB in various intervals. And I will get back to these other measures afterwards. But in general, I want to highlight the initial response in this slide. But the biggest, the stimulus to the economy is opening up of the borders. We could give a lot of loans and everything, but it wouldn't matter as much as the opening up of the borders and the impact that it had. So the border was closed from April to July, and in mid-July, the border was reopened. So tourist arrivals, well, performance was dismal in 2020, but nevertheless, it provided some support to the tourism industry and also the workers in the tourism industry. And it provided foreign exchange to them as well. And because we opened so early, it meant that the Maldives is the kind of only country in the world that is open for tourists. And because of the geographical dispersed nature of the islands, it is a natural quarantine home. The resorts can be viewed as such as well. So people came to Maldives, they stayed for long. So because of the revenue from tourism improved better than we expected. And although 2020 was a dismal year in terms of comparison with 2019 and before, I think it did enough to provide businesses with some cash flow support. But in 2021, the industry revived. It performed very well compared to the crisis that we were in. Although we did not reach the heights of 2019 or pre-pandemic levels, we were on a good trajectory to reach these levels in 2022 or afterwards. So this is, I believe that this is the biggest stimulus that the country got, the opening up of borders and getting the tourism up and running. And we also postponed tax obligations so that there would be some cash flow support. So we didn't want to press taxpayers too hard. And we wanted the money that they had, divert them into region employment and also to revive business activities. But it was only postponed. So these taxes and fees will be paid back in 2022 and 2023. So whatever that they have to pay as taxes. So this is also another support that we provided. And at the same time, we also provided cash flow social support. So vulnerable segments, they would be much more affected than the others. So we have to look at the vulnerable groups and the expert laborers as well. So because expert laborers would be, because there is an employment crisis, they could be on the streets as well. So we didn't want these laborers on the street, and the government tried to help the exploited laborers as well. And support systems were established. And because food security was a concern initially, because we didn't know what the uncertainty was quite high. So that's why we had stocked essential goods, staples, medicine for 6 months requirement. So these are the initial things that we did to support the economy and to provide an immediate response to the COVID-19 crisis. So the initial actions were targeted to ensure a swift and extensive response to defeat the virus, protect the households and businesses, and to kickstart a quick rebound. These policies cannot be continued in a similar manner over time. So this cannot be done because this was a response to a crisis. And because of this, as I mentioned before, debt levels has increased. We have other issues to address now. So policies need a shift as the outlook becomes clearer. And also we need to address these uncertainties as well as the risks that the country is facing in terms of economy and fiscal matters. So the first thing I want to mention is that there is a limit to the government's ability to support. And there is a need to reprioritize the spending and how the government would support the economy. It's not possible for us to indefinitely support the economy through stimulus package, tax payment delays. So we have to see how we can support. So we reprioritized. So there was a new corporation established in 2019, SME Development Finance Corporation. We were giving capital to the corporation at that time. So we diverted this capital to the loans for economic stimulus in 2021. And we continued providing loans to the businesses through the SDFC and also the Bank of Maldives. It is financed through European Investment Bank. The primary idea is that because of COVID-19, the structure of business, structure of the economy has changed a bit. So the new businesses that are being started, we need to support these new businesses, support the growth of these new businesses through various financing schemes. I would like to recall that access to finance is an impediment to these medium and small enterprises. So we have to assist these companies, these businesses, so that they flourish and also bring more employment later on. So this is something that we prioritized. We did tax enforcement, it was much heavily enforced in 2019. We didn't enforce as much with an understanding of liquidity constraints faced by the businesses. And government projects were targeted to increase economic efficiency and resiliency. So where we can improve or where we can change the supply side of the economy, these projects be continued, and anything we have started we continue, but anything we haven't started, we look at, we prioritize, and we look at the impact that it may have on the economy and start as such. So there is a need to reprioritize, and this reprioritization has been done in 2021. I think it needs to continue in the next couple of years as well. So we need to redesign the fiscal policy now. So we have to have two goals on hand. So back in 2021 and 2020, the idea is that we address the crisis and try to get out of the crisis as soon as possible, and then address the other issues later on. So now we have a heightened debt level and an increased fiscal risk. So we need to redesign the fiscal policy and look at two things. So one is growth, other is fiscal sustainability. And to reduce debt. So debt, not in terms of levels, I think it would be quite high. It would remain high over the medium term as well. But to reduce debt in terms of GDP, the nominal GDP growth should be higher than the debt growth. So this is one of the key goals that we have identified to achieve, to go towards fiscal sustainability and improve the fiscal resilience. So, so this is how we designed the fiscal strategy last year as well. So we wanted to keep the nominal GDP growth higher than the debt growth. The debt will increase because of the projects that are ongoing. So there are very large projects as well, but at the same time, we look at these projects, any additional debt that we accrue, it should be reduced or staggered as much as possible so that it doesn't increase or surpass the nominal GDP growth. We identified 3 anchors in the fiscal strategy: to reduce the budgetary central government debt to 105% by 2023, reduce the primary deficit of budget deficit by to 5%. So this is coming back to normal levels. So the budget deficit has increased quite significantly because of COVID, but we want to bring it down to the normal levels of pre-pandemic levels over the medium term, and to maintain a reducing path for both budget deficit and debt over the medium term. So these are main anchors that we identified in the fiscal strategy. So the policy is designed, policy should be designed to achieve these anchors so that we achieve both fiscal sustainability as well as growth. So economic growth is important because economic growth or the GDP growth is the denominator of everything, So if we don't grow, then we would be stuck in a crisis all the while. So it is important that we grow and grow out of the crisis. So nominal GDP growth and economic growth should be a target for the economy, but this shouldn't be at the expense of fiscal sustainability. So to improve the fiscal sustainability, we have number of measures has to be implemented. So one thing is quite obvious: expenditure efficiency. So we wanted to phase out the COVID-19 spending and institutionalize the COVID-19 operations into normal work of ministries and offices, increase efficiency of subsidies, increase the efficiency of existing high spending programs. Government has a lot of programs, so we want to look at the outcome and output of these programs and redesign these programs over the medium term. So it wouldn't reduce the spending overnight, but over the medium term, we try to do that. So there are a number of activities going on. So there will be a lot on the news as well. And improve the governance of SOEs and managing SOE capital contributions. As I have highlighted before, guarantees, debt guarantees is something we have to address. So that is one reason why the debt has increased. So we have to look at how we manage these guarantees and risk from guarantees, and guarantees are given primarily to SOEs. So we have to look at how we improve the governance of SOEs and try to reduce SOE capital contributions as well over the medium term. And we have to look at the alternative financing methods such as PPPs. So we are looking at that now. We established a PPP unit at the ministry to look at how we can finance projects through PPPs rather than financing it through the budget. And we want to revisit the revenue policy and increase the revenue and resources that are generated domestically. So we are now revising the GST Act. We're redrafting that, and we will be developing a medium-term revenue strategy as well, and see how we can revisit the revenue policy. I think with the change in the economic structure, there are areas where we can tap or increase the tax base. So we want to tap into those as well. And we want to increase the credibility and predictability of the financing plans so that investors find comfort in the our plans for the economy. And another thing is reducing the risks associated with debt and fiscal health. So increased debt has increased risks, and managing these risks would be crucial in the medium term. So this would be addressing the challenges in the medium term. So we issued several sukuks and bonds in 2020 and 2021, and this will be due in 2026. So there's a large financing, something that we have to address before 2026. So I showed you a graph before. There was a large debt repayment for 2022, but we refinanced it successfully, and we pushed it across to the medium term. This will only provide us with time. With time, we have to make use of the time and make new strategies to address this. It would have been very difficult to address the liquidity constraint in the midst of a crisis. But now, once we get out of the crisis, I think we get time to address the challenges ahead, and we have to address this as well. So I think that is something that we should do. Something government has done recently is build a sovereign development fund. So we put in money to a sovereign development fund. So airport development fee goes to this fund. So we recently increased this fee. So the deposits to the SDF now would be higher than before. So this would build up the sovereign development fund over the medium term. I think we would have a larger fund to address. So we already have about more than $200 million, I think about $220 or $230 million in sovereign development fund at this point in time as well. So it would increase to, I think, more than 600 by 2026, possibly. At the same time, we also put some forced savings into this fund as well, so that when there is good liquidity, or when the cash flow is good, we also put some money into the SDF from revenue, so that we have the capacity and for debt repayment as well in the future. But at the same time, provide a comfort to investors from this fund. So this is one thing that has been done very well. And we publish fiscal risk statements, which we acknowledge the risks that we are facing with, and we have the intention to actively work on this risk mitigation. I think the risk statements, once we write them down, publish, so we have to address these risks. So this is something that has been done recently. So this would improve the governance of risk management. And at the same time, we publish a medium-term debt strategy to manage the risk associated with that as well. So this is also something that we try to manage the risks over the medium term. So with the change in policy and management of risks, I think that would be what we should do in the road ahead. Now I will look at the outlook and challenges. Structurally, the country faces a lot of issues, like I mentioned before. So one thing we have to tackle is macro fiscal policy reform. So I have highlighted in previous slides, in addition to this, we have to manage liquidity pressures and balance growth and fiscal prudence objectives, expenditure efficiency, and revenue reform, and also bring down the government debt in terms of GDP. So these reforms are necessary in the medium term and for the long-term future to improve the fiscal sustainability. But at the same time, we have structural issues with the economy. So as a small island nation, the dispersed population, it leads to lack of economies of scale and also market access. So we need to increase connectivity so that people and goods can be moved across. And reliance on one industry, the tourism industry, it increases the extent to which we are affected because of shocks, just like COVID-19 and other shocks. So diversifying tourism industry within the industry itself, and also through across the economy as a whole, is crucial. We also face the issue of Dutch disease because of the reliance on tourism industry. So that we also need to look at how we can best make use of this issue. Tourism industry is obviously the best performing industry. I think it will remain so. But at the same time, we need to make sure that its benefits goes across number of people rather than a small group. So it has to be more inclusive. So, and also at the same time, we want our policies and also the investments to be climate adaptive and also greener. And at the same time, I think we also need, the economy is highly dollarized. So one of the concerns of the people with high dollarization of the economy, I think we also need to address this issue as well in the medium term. To overcome growth constraints, the growth constraint that I have highlighted before, dispersed population, access to finance for MSMEs, and vulnerability to economic and climate shocks and infrastructure limitation, we need to overcome these challenges. The policies are designed as such. So we need to make sure that we address these challenges as much as the fiscal health allows. And this would improve growth over the medium term and long term. We have to make sure that the long-term growth rate is maintained or even elevated or transformed. So in conclusion, Maldives was on a good growth path when COVID-19 crisis occurred. Although there were challenges, the government and the economy was stretching to its limits in search of high growth and economic transformation. That is back in before pre-COVID. COVID-19 was a major disruption to this story. Initially, we tried to ensure healthcare capacity to deal with the pandemic and economic support households and businesses to overcome the cash flow issues. But we cannot continue the same policies indefinitely. Policies needs to be shifted as the outlook becomes clearer. Fiscal sustainability will be a crucial policy dialogue in years to come. Major reforms are necessary to mitigate risks and ensure a sustainable fiscal path. Sacrificing growth too heavily will not also be prudent. The economy shall grow out of the crisis and its after effects. So we need growth actually as a denominator of every indicator. The growth should be prioritized and it should be something we should be looking for, but with fiscal sustainability in mind. And we need to address the growth challenges and to be on an elevated growth path. And a particular emphasis should be given to make growth more inclusive and greener. And this concludes my presentation. And thank you very much for listening. And I await your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saruvash Adam. Thank you so much for your interesting presentation. We have received lots of questions, so without wasting much time, let me share the questions. I try to club one or two questions so that it'll be easy for you to address them. The first question is, what is the share of Chinese debt on Maldives? Do you see Maldives entering into a debt trap or economic recession like that of Sri Lanka? That is one. Second is that what is the situation of poverty and inequality in Maldives? How has COVID-19 and recent Russia-Ukraine crisis impact the marginalized people of Maldives? So we'll go with these two questions.
Right. So let me answer the first question. The Chinese debt. Well, in terms of the official debt is very concessional for the government. So over 90% of debt is highly concessional. So even from China or other multilateral agencies in other countries, we have a very concessional debt portfolio, apart from the bonds that we have issued. So bonds and sukuks, these were invested by the market. So it would have Chinese investors, European investors, and other investors. So in terms of debt, I think official debt, we have a good standing, I think, in terms of debt service to revenue ratio. If the revenue performs well, we should be fine. The main risks to debt come from the guarantees that are given to SOEs to build infrastructure in cities. So this is something we have to manage. So this includes some commercial debt as well. So this is a difficult area, I think. That is something that has been acknowledged by the government in the debt and also fiscal risk statement. So this is the area that we have to look at. Rather than looking at the debt by country, I think we have to look at how not every debt is equal. So where the debt is riskier, we need to address those risks and manage those risks. So by doing that, I think we should be able to manage the risks associated with the debt, and also try to avoid situations that are difficult that countries face. I think in terms of debt service to revenue ratio and how we look at the revenue trajectory over medium term, I think we are in a comfortable position, and we should be able to service debt over the medium term as well. And I say this because revenue to the government is quite good. So we have a good tax system, and the tax collection efficiency is also very, very good. And over the medium term, we are also looking at how we can revise or reform revenue strategies, and because of this, we would have the liquidity necessary to service debt as well. But at the same time, we have to look at how the debt and debt service affect the budget as a whole. So historically, it was 15% of the budget goes to debt service. Now it is much higher, more than 20%, 25% actually. So we should bring it down. So that's why I mentioned in the presentation that we need to address those and bring down this as well. But at the same time, the thing is, we borrowed money for something to create something for the future. For example, we built airport. We want to bring revenue in the future from the airport, so that the economy also grows, at the same time government revenue also grows. So it should support the economy as a whole. And the second question was, can you repeat the second question?
The second question was, what is the situation of poverty and inequality in Maldives, and how has COVID impacted the marginalized communities in Maldives?
Right. So the Gini coefficient is around 0.4, if I remember correctly. So there is a considerable degree of inequality, I would say. So I wouldn't say it is very equal. The wealth of the tourism sector, it has not transformed, has not gone to the local population as much as it should have. But there are changes in policies. For example, we had guest house industries, so tourism becomes more accessible to small investors as well, small MSMEs as well. And recently, government has introduced homestay tourism as well. So this would diversify the tourism industry within, and it would move the wealth of tourism industry to other people, normal people, and also to the micro and small enterprises as well. So this would reduce inequality. But as you have mentioned, a shock such as COVID or Russia-Ukraine would affect the vulnerable communities as a whole. So that's why we also look at the social protection. So we look at how the people are affected because of the various shocks. So government actually spent on protecting the vulnerable groups. So whenever there is somebody is falling off the safety net, we try to help them through various government programs. And during COVID, government helped the vulnerable populations through safe homes and so forth. So these programs continue. And with respect to Russia, Ukraine, the economic impact is not as much as expected. So we had a bump, but I think we were able to overcome that bump fairly quickly. Russian tourists reduced in March, April, but I think other markets are compensating for this drop, and also the Russian market is also picking up. So it didn't have as much impact as we expected before.
Let me share 3 more questions, which is on tourism. Looking at the case of Maldives, how do you see its impact on a small economies like Nepal that also relies on tourism? That is one. In post-pandemic, in order to revive the tourism sector, has the government announced any initiative? How can Maldives attract more tourists? And third is, there is a question that you have stated that tourism is a major sector that supports the economy of Maldives. I would like to ask as to what other sector can Maldives tap in order to, in other than tourism, if Maldives want to diversify its revenue generation in order to protect its economy from any future shocks.
Right. Well, in terms of tourism sector, well, tourism would be the largest sector in the Maldives, and I think in other countries like Nepal as well, the tourism would be quite large. For this, I think the country needs to be, the one thing that Maldives did well in COVID-19 is that, like I said before, to open the borders and welcome the tourists. So do we have to live with the new normal and make sure that we reduce the number of cases of COVID and live with the disease without overburdening the health sector. So I think this is something all the countries needs to do. So without increasing the number of cases in the country or community spread or health scare, trying to manage the situation at the same time, get on with the businesses, including tourism. I think this would be the key in reviving the economy and also the tourism sector. Maldives, the hotels, tourism sector, hotels and resorts, they did very well adapt to the new normal situations. I think the industry also took a sacrifice in terms of workers and how they engage and how they even provide leave and so forth. So I think they have to adapt within to adapt to the whole situation so that there is contribution from the industry to the economy as a whole. And in terms of, so what was the second question?
Second question was that one of the economic on Nepal. Second was that has the government of Maldives taken any initiatives to attract more tourists? Right.
So for the traditional market of the Maldives is Europe and China, right, before COVID. China is the largest that inflow of tourists come from China. So without China, we are getting more tourists from other markets than before, than pre-COVID levels. And we are below pre-COVID levels because China is not open yet. So if China opens, we would be beyond the pre-pandemic levels than before. But at the same time, I would like to mention that the tourism is largely private sector driven. It's a private sector success story. So government, it's not the government who would do the advertising and trying to attract the tourists. It is a private sector who would do that, and they would bring the tourists, and they would try to advertise the whole industry, because it would directly benefit the resorts and also those businesses. So that they would be investing in the promoting the Maldives tourism. But at the same time, government also invests. So government has increased the promotion spending compared to 2018. In 2018, we spent $3 million. Now we spend $10 million on promotion. So government has also given more emphasis on promoting tourism for destination marketing. But I would give credit to the private sector for their good work and to tap into different markets. From what we engage with the industry, I see that private sector is quite keen to tap into other markets where we haven't addressed before, like long haul flights to the American, Europe, beyond the Atlantic, so Canadian and the American markets. And also the South African market is also something that the industry looks at. So these are other markets that the industry looks at. Traditionally, it was European, but the industry is also looking at increasing the horizon, broadening the horizon as well. But at the same time, we have to understand that China is also there. At some point, China will be open. So once China opens, there will be more inflow of tourists. And at the same time, we have to think about the bed capacity and the airport capacity as well. That's why the government is investing in the airport and get the airport ready by revised timeline is 2024. But when it is ready, the bottleneck will be the bed. So we want to increase the bed capacity as well. So the government is also trying to help with the trying to bring as much resource to the operation as much as possible. So this is something that we look at. And the third question?
Third question was how can Maldives diversify in order to generate revenue apart from tourism?
Well, yeah, tourism would be, I think, would be the largest industry in the future as well. So there is, it would be very hard to defeat, or reduce the share of. We can reduce the share, but the tourism would be the #1 industry. But apart from that, I think the industries that we can look at is the fisheries. Fisheries would be, because we are largely surrounded by the sea, and adding value to our fish catch and exporting of fish with a profit or good value addition, it would improve the fisheries industry as a whole. So I think we need to look at how we can revive the fisheries industry and see how we can improve the value addition within the fisheries industry. That's one thing we have to look at. And the other areas is we are also very import reliant. So a lot of things are imported, even a lot of food items are imported. So import substitution is something we can look at, so that there is less leakage from the economy as imports, rather than we can try to produce them here. So incentivizing agriculture is something that government is looking at, so that we can create those value within the economy rather than importing these goods. But this would also be limited to some extent. And other areas, because we are surrounded by the sea, government is also looking at other large investments such as port development, port operations. So this is also something that the country is looking at. So there are a few areas that we can explore further into. The immediate, the most obvious industry would be fisheries.
Mr. Adams, we are running out of time and we still have lots of questions. Is it possible to stretch the webinar by next 10 minutes maximum?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. You just mentioned fisheries. So fishery share of fishery contribute 3% of GDP of Maldivian's economy. So what is the impact of COVID in this sector?
Well, during COVID-19, fisheries sector is the industry that performed well. The fishermen, they went out and they caught fish, and I think this is an industry that grew during COVID-19. But the effect of COVID-19 was quite large on fisheries as well, because the price of tuna dropped heavily during COVID-19. And this would affect the value addition that we create and how much we can support to the fishermen as well. So government has a price for the fish catch as well, from the local fisheries corporation. They buy at a certain fixed price, and the fishermen, the price that they get was reduced because the price dropped in the international market. So the fishermen, their income was also affected, but the real production during COVID-19 increased during COVID-19. So this is an industry that grew in terms of production, but in terms of value addition, I think it would have it would be very tricky, because government had to support quite extensively because the price dropped during COVID-19.
There are lots of questions on medium and micro, small and medium enterprises. Like medium and small scale enterprises are affected due to the pandemic. Since country of Ireland does not have industries, what are the government initiatives to promote MSME? And there's another one, like uncertainty fund and MSME insurance scheme may be helpful for sustaining the finance of small and medium industries. So what do you think of these in case of Maldivian economy?
Well, in terms of the supporting MSMEs, the country, we have an MSME Act, and there's an amount dedicated from the budget that should go towards MSMEs as loan schemes. But this in 2018, we spent around 90 million rupiah a year to support MSMEs from the government budget. So this is about less than about 5 million, just a little bit above $7 million. And this is very small actually, compared to how much the support that MSMEs need. So the government in 2019 increased this amount. They've found a new MSME corporation, SME Development Finance Corporation. And we are supporting MSMEs through this finance corporation. And we have been giving capital since 2019 to capitalize this corporation and to provide loans to MSMEs. So we gave loans in 2019, 2020, first half of the year, but because of the COVID-19, we have to reprioritize and provide, change these loans to relief packages and also stimulus loans into different areas. I think how we can help is to keep the support going. The thing is, the government wouldn't be able to understand single-handedly what is best for the economy. It is not possible. As a market economy, the entrepreneurs, the businesses, they will come with the feasible businesses. They will come with proposals and try to get funding. There is a what government can do is to open an avenue for funding. So access to finance is a critical constraint to growth. So we are overcoming that through SDFC to providing loans to MSMEs, or having a window, an avenue that MSMEs can tap for funding through these schemes. So this is something that we have done, and I think this is something we can expand into as well. So over the medium term, I think how businesses can be supported through SME Finance Corporation is something that we have to look at. Well, insurance, and I think these are good ideas. I think we have to look at the feasibility. I haven't looked at it yet, so and see how it would fit within the context in the Maldives as well. But MSME Finance Corporation, it is a success story. I think it is doing remarkably well to support the MSMEs in the country.
There are lots of questions on environment, like rising sea level is of grave concern for Maldives. It hosted underwater cabinet meeting to attract global attention. It is of great concern for people of Nepal as well. Nepal hosted cabinet meeting at the Everest base camp. So how is environmental issues going to challenge the economic growth of Maldives? There's another question that, is there any case of climate change and its impact on country's economy? If yes, how can it be addressed?
Well, climate change is an inevitable crisis, I would say, to the Maldivian economy and country as a whole. I think we feel the effects of climate change. There are more islands being eroded. We have to invest in coastal protection of these islands, because when the coast is eroded heavily, it affects people's livelihood in terms of their businesses, and also the residents that the houses that they live in. So we have to address the issue of the coastal erosion, and there is also sea level rise, and in general there's a rise in temperature as well. And because of this, the people who would need water in the dry season has also increased recently. So the government has to address these issues. So we have to invest in coastal protection and also harbors. These are primarily climate adaptation investments that the government has to do. And it has increased the spending from the government budget for these activities. So what I would like to mention here is that because of climate change, government has to increase or have a portion of the budget for these programs, so that we address the climate change or adaptation issues as we go. Otherwise, we could have diverted these funds to perhaps education and health sector for the social development. So this is an opportunity cost for us. And at the same time, the water shortage. So government has to supply water to various islands during the dry season. So this is also an area where we spend from the budget. So we feel the impact of climate change within the budget. So it is something inevitable. I think we will have to endure that as well. And at the same time, we have to make sure that we achieve an economic goal as well with the climate adaptation. So what government does is, when we do coastal protection, we also do harbors. And for water shortage, one of the things the government is keen on is having water and sewerage investments or the systems in every island of the country, so that there is water being produced, desalinated from the sea water, and supplied to houses. So there is no need for government to spend on water supply during the dry season. It can be produced in-house. And the harbor and coastal protection, this would help, for example, through guest house industry, where it would improve the accessibility to the island, and it would it would help the guest house industry as well. So government is not just looking at the climate adaptation, but at the same time, climate adaptation with an economic advantage, or bring some economic activities to the island community as well. So this is how we try to address the issue. I would say it is a serious issue, and it is eating up a lot of budget space, but I think it is inevitable.
Mr. Adam, we still have lots of questions, but we hardly have one. Let me put the last question for today. You mentioned that connectivity is very important for the growth of Maldives. What are the different connectivity initiatives in Maldives to enhance the growth? Another question that we have received is that BIMSTEC also talks about greater connectivity in the region. So what kind of infrastructure projects can Maldives expect through BIMSTEC to enhance the economic growth?
Well, we looked at the connectivity in terms of a PPP model, public-private partnership model before, and it has mixed results. So now government is looking at to addressing the problem through the government budget. So before, it was a ferry network between islands and atolls and between regions. And in some regions it worked well, in some regions it didn't. So from learning from the experiences, like from 10 years back, now government is investing for connectivity through the budget. And there is an initiative called high-speed ferry network. So we are piloting this in the most northern region of the Maldives now. So right now there is pilot boats going through the whole region. So there are just like a train network. There's a ferry network between islands, so people and goods can be moved. So initially, it may operate at a loss, but over time, we hope that goods and people move, and then it brings up at least a break even, so that the amount that we spend from the government budget for operation could be minimized. By the same time, the increased economic activities through this connectivity comes into fruition, so that goods move to larger population centers, and people in rural islands, they make money from supplying these goods and services across the region. If it's successful, it will be expanded across the Maldives. So it will be phased in from region by region. And once completed, the whole country should be connected as a whole. But this is also an expensive program. So because of the constraint on the budget, we are taking a phased-in approach for this. And hopefully in the medium term, we should be able to achieve this. And in terms of regional connectivity, I think there are a few initiatives ongoing. In the Maldives, we have a cargo ferry coming from India, very recent initiative, I think last year. And it connects the northern port of the Maldives in Kovid city with the, I think, Cochin in India. I think there is scope for larger connectivity within the region. We have a large population in South Asia. So Maldives is very small. I think Maldives can benefit from being connected to this large mass of population just near our door. And I think Maldives can also offer good value to our neighbors as well in terms of businesses, and also various value addition activities. I think there are ways we can collaborate and have a win-win situation within the region. The growth mostly actually comes from people and technology and productivity. So I think South Asia has productive people, and we need to increase capital and the machinery and capital within the region, and it can be accumulated through various business activities and through various investments. And we of course have people, so as a whole, I think we can try to have all together we can rise up, rather than being isolated. There is value in integration.
Mr. Saruvash Adam, thank you for enlightening presentation and interesting discussion. I, on behalf of NICE and all our audience, would like to thank you for your kind presence and valuable time. We hope to have you in Kathmandu in future. We'd also like to thank all our audience for their wonderful questions. Thank you and have a nice day.